Welcome to my channel, The World of Science Fiction. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.
The neon signs of Xylos bled into the perpetual twilight, casting an eerie glow across the market moon's rain-slick surfaces. Chemical precipitation had left puddles of iridescent liquid that reflected the garish advertisements hawking everything from synth narcotics to black market augmentations. The air hung heavy with the mingled scents of exotic spices, machine oil, and desperation. Rex moved through the dense crowd like a ghost, his worn thermocoat pulled tight against the chill, concealing the custom blaster pistol pressed against his side. Years of hunting had taught him the art of invisibility, not true cloaking, but the ability to blend, to move with such practiced neutrality that the mind's eye simply refused to register his presence. His face, weathered by harsh atmospheres and harsher memories, betrayed nothing of the anticipation coursing through him. He was a hunter, and the scent of credits was in the air. Rotating his wrist subtly, he checked the projection from his neural link tracking drone. The holographic display flickered against his skin, showing his target's position 5 kilometers away in the upper markets of Xylos. Zia. Even her name carried weight in certain circles. A blue-skinned warrior from the Cerulean matriarchy, with combat skills that had become the stuff of legend in the outer systems. The guild briefing had included unusual cultural notes about her people. A matriarchal society with elaborate customs surrounding bonds and contracts. Rex had skimmed that section. Cultural anthropology wasn't relevant to the hunt. What mattered was that she was worth more than any bounty he'd pursued in years. Enough to buy him freedom, a clean slate, and a fast ship out of this sector, away from the memories that haunted his sleep. The briefing had also mentioned the matriarchy's strange ritual practices, including something about honor bonds and contractual combat, but Rex had dismissed it as irrelevant. His job was capture, not cultural understanding. Now he wished he'd paid closer attention. But the drone feed had a 30-second delay, a technological limitation he'd learned to compensate for, because in his line of work, 30 seconds was an eternity. He didn't need to see where she was. He needed to know where she would be. Rex closed his eyes briefly, his augmented mind calculating variables with cold precision. Crowd density patterns, traffic flow analytics, logical escape routes based on her known tendencies. He factored in the station's architecture, the unique social dynamics of Xylos, and the behavioral algorithms he'd compiled on his target. Opening his eyes, he moved with renewed purpose toward a grimy alleyway that overlooked one of the primary transport hubs. It was a natural choke point, a place she would have to pass if she wanted to leave the station. The perfect place for an ambush. The alley reeked of decay and forgotten dreams. Rex positioned himself behind a stack of abandoned cargo modules, their faded corporate logos telling stories of bankrupt shipping companies and failed enterprises. He assembled his tranquilizer rifle with practiced efficiency, each component clicking into place with satisfying precision. Through the scope, he had a clear view of the transport hub below. And then she appeared, just as his calculations had predicted. A flash of azure skin and silver hair amidst the drab colors of the crowd. Her movements were fluid, purposeful, her eyes constantly scanning her surroundings. Even from this distance, he could see the tension in her shoulders, the wariness of prey that knows it's being hunted. Rex steadied his breathing, his finger finding the trigger. He accounted for the drone's delay, leading the target by a half-second, and squeezed. The dart whispered from the barrel, a nearly invisible projectile designed for silent incapacitation. Through the scope, he watched with professional satisfaction as the dart struck her shoulder. She stumbled, momentarily disoriented, and fell behind a large cargo container. The hunt was over. A grim satisfaction settled in Rex's gut as he disassembled his rifle with the same efficiency with which he'd assembled it. Another successful capture. Another step closer to wiping his ledger clean. His reputation among the guild would be enhanced. Rex Varro, the hunter who caught the uncatchable Zaya of the Cerulean matriarchy. The bounty alone was substantial, but the prestige, that was worth almost as much in his profession. He descended to the transport hub, moving with the casual confidence of someone who belonged, who had every right to be there. His hand rested on the stun cuffs at his belt as he rounded the cargo container, ready to secure his prize before she fully succumbed to the sedative. But the space behind the container was empty. Rex froze, his body tensing like a coiled spring. His mind raced through possibilities, analyzing, recalculating. He'd seen the dart hit. He never missed. He'd staked his reputation, his very survival on that certainty. Unless, looking for me, a voice whispered, silken steel directly behind him. Rex felt the cold, sharp point of a knife press against his throat, precisely positioned over his carotid artery. His pulse hammered against the blade, each beat a reminder of how precarious his position had become. Cold sweat broke out across his forehead as the reality of his situation crashed down on him. Years of successful hunts, and now he would die in a filthy transport hub, his throat cut by his own target. Fear, something he hadn't truly felt in years, flooded his system. Not just fear of death, but fear of failure. Of ending like this, anonymous and forgotten. His muscles tensed, calculating if he could spin away before the blade bit deep, knowing even as he considered it that the movement would be suicide. The pressure was expert, just enough to communicate the threat without breaking skin. In her other hand, held within his peripheral vision, Zaya casually tossed his tranquilizer dart in the air, catching it between two slender blue fingers. The crowd around them had gone quiet, forming a wide circle. Dozens of eyes watched the tableau with hungry fascination. A predator caught by his prey. Rex assessed his options with clinical detachment, forcing his breathing to steady despite the knife at his throat. She had his weapon. The knife at his throat made any sudden movement suicidal. The crowd meant no clear escape route. His perfect record was about to end in public humiliation. How? Rex managed, his mind struggling to process the failure. The calculations had been perfect. The shot had been perfect. You didn't miss, she said, her breath warm against his ear, carrying the faint scent of some exotic spice. You won. She didn't rush to explain. Instead, she pushed him forward into the center of the human circle that had formed around them. With theatrical deliberation, she raised his tranquilizer dart above her head, her voice ringing out in a language he didn't understand, melodic yet fierce. The honor hunt is complete. The chosen is found. The crowd gasped collectively. Some backed away further, others leaned in, whispering urgently to companions. A few merchants quickly closed their stalls, sensing trouble. Rex remained still, confusion warring with caution. Whatever game this was, he was dangerously unprepared for it. Then it happened, a searing pain at the back of his neck, precisely where the dart had struck her. He reached up instinctively, fingers finding a small puncture wound that hadn't been there moments before. Something cold spread from the site, racing through his veins like liquid metal. Zaya's eyes met his, a flash of recognition passing between them. The bond is forming, she said, so quietly only he could hear. Don't fight it. What did you? He began, but his words were lost as his mind exploded with sensation. Blue-tinged memory fragments, foreign emotions, pain that wasn't his own, a laboratory, scientists in matriarchy colors, a voice. The neural nanites are stable. Once transferred to the hunt victor, the bond will be complete. Rex staggered, disoriented by the flood of alien thoughts. He felt Zaya steady him, her hand firm on his arm. Neural nanites, he whispered, the knowledge suddenly there in his mind, placed as if it had always been his own. You infected me with your memories? Not infection, connection, she corrected, her voice steady despite the tension in her body. Our minds are now linked. It's part of the hunt ritual. The nanites transferred from me to you through the dart, creating a neural bridge. Zaya switched to common speech, her voice raised, making this a public declaration. By the ancient laws of the Cerulean matriarchy, this hunter has proven worthy. The contract is sealed. A ripple moved through the crowd. Someone shouted something in a harsh dialect. Another voice responded in the same language. Rex caught fragments of translation through his implant. Warlord will not, and bloodshed coming. Only then did she disarm him with a series of fluid, precise movements that left his blaster in her hand and his arms pinned behind his back. The crowd continued watching, their expressions ranging from awe to apprehension. The bounty was a lie, Zaya said, her voice tight with controlled fury. By the laws of my clan, when a woman seeks to break an arranged bond, she can declare an honor hunt. Rex tried to turn his head to see her face, but she maintained her hold, keeping him facing forward. What are you talking about? The bounty is not for my capture or death, she continued, but for my freedom. Her words made no sense to him, yet the crowd's reaction suggested they understood perfectly. Some were already backing away, wanting no part in whatever was unfolding. Any man who can defeat me in a contest of skill claims me as his new chosen, nullifying the previous contract. As she spoke, the nanites in Rex's bloodstream fully activated, creating a cascade of foreign memories. Not words or explanations, but raw experience flooding his consciousness. A younger Zaya, barely 16 cycles, standing before a council of blue-skinned elders. Their voices echo in a vast chamber as they pronounce judgment. The alliance will stand. The contract is sealed. Behind them, a copper-skinned figure watches with cold satisfaction. The sensation of being property, of having no voice. The suffocating weight of ownership pressing down, making each breath an act of defiance. Rex gasped, the memory emotion so vivid he could taste her desperation. The nanites were translating her experiences directly into his neural pathways, bypassing language entirely. You tracked me across 3 systems, Zaya was saying, her grip relaxing slightly. You predicted my movements with uncanny accuracy. You landed your shot. Zaya kneeling before Kalen, her back exposed, the brand in his hand glowing white-hot. This will remind you of your place, his voice silky with menace. The searing agony as the metal meets flesh. Her scream quickly bitten back, refusing to give him the satisfaction. The smell of burning skin, her skin, filling the chamber. Rex shuddered violently, his body responding as if the pain were his own. The nanites weren't just transferring memories. They were creating a true empathic link, forcing him to experience what she had endured. He turned to face her, finding her violet eyes studying him with an unreadable expression. By the laws of the matriarchy, you have proven yourself worthy, she said. A secret council, female warriors gathered in shadow, an elder speaking in hushed tones. The honor hunt has not been invoked in 7 generations. If you fail, the punishment is death. Not just for you, but for anyone who aided you. The weight of a ceremonial dagger as it's placed in her hands. The cold certainty that there is no turning back. The scientists explaining, the nanites carry your essence, your memories. They will bond with his neural system, creating an empathic bridge. He will know your truth without words. This is why the hunt has power. It forces understanding. You're telling me I just married you? Rex asked, the absurdity of the situation momentarily overriding his hunter's caution. Bodies hanging in a public square. The weight of the dead pressing on her consciousness. A placard. Violators of contract law. Kalen walking among them, inspecting his handiwork with casual cruelty. Let this be a lesson, he announces to the gathered crowd. The matriarchy's laws are absolute. The knowledge that her failure would add more bodies to this display. You just became the only thing standing between me and Warlord Kalen, she corrected, her eyes flashing. And he's not as merciful as I am. As if summoned by her words, a commotion erupted at the edge of the transport hub. Black-armored figures pushed through the scattering crowd, their movements purposeful and threatening. At their center walked a tall figure, copper-skinned, his face bisected by a jagged scar. Now you're my problem, bounty hunter, Zia said, shoving his blaster back into his hands. And this, she nodded toward the approaching figures, is your problem. Run if you want to live long enough to understand what cage you've just stepped into. Kalen addressing his hunters, his voice cold with fury. Bring her back alive. Kill anyone with her. The matriarchy's laws are specific. Only she must survive to face judgment. The clinical detachment as he describes the punishment awaiting her. First the brand, then the isolation chamber. By the time I'm finished, she'll beg for the contract to be reinstated. The vision faded as Rex gripped his weapon, reality crashing back with urgent clarity. The neural nanites had changed everything. This wasn't just about a bounty gone wrong or cultural misunderstanding. He had experienced her truth, felt her pain, known her fear. The connection forced him to see her as more than a target, as a person fighting for her very existence. Together they broke through the cordon, using the chaos of the market to their advantage as they fled into the underlevels of the moon station. A commotion at the edge of the hub confirmed her words. A group of hulking figures in black iron armor were pushing their way through the crowd, their movements purposeful and threatening. The civilians scattered before them like startled animals, sensing danger. Kalen's hunters, Zaya hissed, shoving his blaster back into his hands. Our union is now a fact, recognized by the laws of my people. If you want to live long enough to regret it, you'll fight. Rex checked his weapon with practiced efficiency, his mind racing to catch up with this radical shift in circumstances. He had come to Xylos as a hunter, pursuing a substantial bounty. Now, through some twisted cultural loophole, he found himself legally bound to his target and facing the wrath of a warlord. This way, he said, spotting a maintenance access tunnel partially hidden behind a defunct vendor stall. Together they broke through the cordon, using the chaos of the market to their advantage as they fled into the underlevels of the moon station. The tunnels beneath silos were a labyrinth of forgotten infrastructure and makeshift dwellings. The air was thick with the smell of recycled atmosphere and the distinct odor of the fungal growth that thrived in the artificial twilight. Water dripped from corroded pipes, creating a constant, maddening rhythm that echoed through the narrow passages. We need somewhere to regroup, Rex said, his hunter's instincts shifting seamlessly to survival mode. Somewhere they won't look immediately. Zaya nodded, her eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. The docking bays for decommissioned vessels. Security is minimal, and there are plenty of places to hide. They moved in tense silence, each acutely aware of the other's presence. Rex, a man who cherished his solitude and freedom above all else, was now shackled by an ancient law to the very woman he'd been paid to capture. The irony wasn't lost on him. After navigating a series of increasingly deteriorated corridors, they emerged into a vast, dimly lit chamber. Dozens of ships in various states of disrepair filled the space, silent sentinels of bygone journeys. Some were being stripped for parts, others simply abandoned to the slow decay of time. There, Zaya pointed to a medium-sized freighter with faded insignia on its hull. The Stardust Drifter. She's been here for months. The life support systems should still be operational. They approached the vessel cautiously, Rex taking point with his blaster ready. The boarding ramp was partially extended, creating a narrow gap just large enough for them to slip through. Inside, the ship was a testament to neglect. Dust covered every surface, and the air was stale with the ghosts of 1,000 forgotten journeys. We should be safe here, at least temporarily, Rex said, securing the entry point. Kalen's hunters will be searching the main thoroughfares first. The ship's cavernous cargo hold became their makeshift refuge. Zaya moved to a corner and began cleaning her blade, her movements economical and deadly. The silence between them was heavy with unasked questions and unspoken tensions. This bond, Rex finally said, breaking the silence. There has to be a way to undo it. An appeal, a bribe, another trial. Zaya looked up, her violet eyes reflecting the dim emergency lighting. There is one way, she said coolly. You can sell my contract to another. Kalen would pay you twice the bounty to have me back. Her gaze was piercing, challenging. It would be the logical choice for a man like you. The implication hung between them. He was a bounty hunter, a man who lived by contracts and credits. Her life was just another transaction. Before he could answer, the ship groaned, a subtle shift in its long-dormant systems. The proximity alarm on Rex's wristcom lit up, a silent alert programmed to detect specific energy signatures. Kalen's hunters had found them. They're here, he whispered, moving to a position where he could see the boarding ramp through a grated floor panel. Zaya was instantly alert, her blade ready. How many? At least 6, Rex replied, counting the distinct heat signatures on his wrist display. Heavy weapons. They're not taking chances. They exchanged a look of grim understanding. This wasn't a fight they could avoid. The corridor leading to the engine room, Rex said, quickly formulating a plan. It's narrow. We can create a choke point, force them to come at us 1 or 2 at a time. Zaya nodded, already moving. I'll take point. Your ranged weapon will be more effective from behind cover. The fight was brutal and chaotic. The hunters, clad in armor that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, were methodical in their approach, but clearly unprepared for the level of resistance they encountered. Rex's tactical thinking and Zaya's raw combat prowess created a surprisingly effective combination. He used the ship's architecture to their advantage, creating choke points in narrow corridors and using abandoned cargo to provide cover. His shots were precise, targeting the gaps in the hunter's armor, knee joints, neck seals, visual sensors. Zaya was a revelation in combat, She became a whirlwind of blue-skin fury, her blade a silver arc of death. She moved with a grace that defied the limitations of the confined space, each strike calculated for maximum effect. Where Rex was precision and strategy, she was fluidity and instinct. Together, they were devastatingly effective. But they were outnumbered 3-1, and their opponents were well-equipped and determined. A hunter with a heavy plasma launcher managed to bypass their defensive position, firing a superheated bolt that missed Rex by millimeters, but struck the bulkhead behind him. The impact sent him sprawling, a searing pain lancing through his arm where the plasma had scored his flesh. Zaya dispatched his attacker with a throw of her blade that found the gap between helmet and chest plate, but more were coming. They retreated deeper into the ship, using the labyrinthine corridors to confuse and separate their pursuers. When the last hunter fell, Rex's vision was beginning to blur from pain and blood loss. Zaya wasn't much better. A vicious blow had caught her ribs, and her breathing was shallow and ragged. They couldn't stay where they were. The ship's distress beacon would have activated during the firefight, drawing more hunters within minutes. "We need—" Rex paused, swallowing against the dryness in his throat. "Somewhere they won't look." Zaya nodded, her face tight with pain. "Security protocols. They'll lock down all registered vessels first." Rex's tactical mind, honed by years of hunting, cycled through possibilities. "What about the quarantine sector? Old cargo holds in the restricted zone?" "Radiation containment breached 3 cycles ago," Zia confirmed. "No one goes there without hazard suits." It was their only option. Using maintenance shafts and service tunnels, they made their way toward the quarantine sector. Rex moved with caution, checking his scanner at each junction, calculating patrol patterns and security sweeps. His approach was methodical, precise, a man accustomed to planning every step. Zaya grew increasingly restless with his careful pace. "We're too slow," she said, as he paused at another intersection, consulting his wrist display. "They'll have teams converging from all quadrants." "Rushing gets us caught," he replied, eyes on the scanner. 2 minutes until the security patrol passes." "Or killed," she countered. "This route keeps us exposed too long." Rex looked up, irritation flashing across his face. "You have a better plan?" She pointed upward, to a narrow maintenance shaft barely visible in the ceiling. "Ventilation system. Bypasses 3 intersections. Cuts our exposure time by half. Also puts us in a crawl space with no exit options if they scan for heat signatures. They won't scan what they don't expect." She was already reaching for the access panel. "Wait," Rex began, but she had already pulled herself up and into the shaft. For a moment he stood alone in the corridor, scanner showing the patrol less than a minute away. Go with the plan or follow her improvisation? The hunter in him demanded control, predictability, but instinct, something he'd learned to suppress, told him she might be right. With a muttered curse, he holstered his scanner and pulled himself up into the shaft. The space was narrower than it had appeared, forcing them to crawl on elbows and knees. The metal was cold against his skin, and the air carried the metallic tang of recycled atmosphere. Ahead, Zaya moved with a fluid grace that made the confined space seem almost spacious. He was about to comment on her recklessness when the alarm sounded, a piercing wail that echoed through the ventilation system. Below them, the corridor flooded with armored security personnel. "They've locked onto our signatures," he hissed. "We need to—" "Move," she finished, accelerating her pace. "Trust me. Trust." The word itself was a trap. But what choice did he have? They crawled desperately through the labyrinthine system, the sounds of pursuit growing louder behind them. At a junction, Zaya paused, then took a sharp left, away from the quarantine sector. "Wrong way," Rex warned, but she ignored him, continuing with determined speed. The shaft began to slope downward, then took a steep drop. Zaya disappeared over the edge without hesitation. Rex followed more cautiously, finding himself in a vertical descent. He braced his arms and legs against the sides, controlling his speed as the shaft plunged deeper into the station's infrastructure. Ahead, Zaya had already reached the bottom. She waited, impatience evident in her posture, as he worked his way down. "Where are we?" he demanded as his feet touched solid ground. "Waste processing," she replied. "Checkpoint is 2 levels up. They won't look for us down here." He had to admit it was clever. The waste system was largely automated, rarely patrolled, and the organic material would mask their heat signatures. But it was also dangerously close to the station's reactor cooling systems, a place where radiation levels fluctuated unpredictably. "How did you know about this?" he asked, scanning the area with suspicious eyes. "I studied the station schematics before coming to Xylos," she replied. "Escape routes or survival." Rex felt a grudging respect. While he relied on tech and tactical planning, she had prepared by memorizing the very bones of the station, different approaches to the same problem. Their path forward took them through the bowels of Xylos, places forgotten by most of the station's inhabitants. Zaya led the way confidently, navigating by memory, while Rex kept his scanner active, alert for security measures or environmental hazards. They reached a maintenance hatch that, according to Zaya, would lead them to the quarantine sector. As Rex prepared to bypass the security lock, his scanner emitted a warning chirp. "Wait," he said, studying the readout. "Radiation spike. This whole corridor is hot." Zaya peered over his shoulder at the scanner. "How bad?" "Lethal within an hour. We need protection." She eyed the security lock. "How long to bypass?" 3 minutes, maybe 4. She shook her head. "Too long. Guards could sweep this level any moment." Without warning, she slammed her elbow into the panel beside the lock. The cover cracked, exposing internal circuitry. Before Rex could protest, she jammed her blade into the massive wires, twisting sharply. The door slid open, but alarms immediately blared throughout the corridor. "Are you insane?" Rex shouted over the noise, but Zaya was already through the door. "Move now! Complain later!" They sprinted through the threshold just as emergency containment protocols engaged. The door slammed shut behind them, sealing them in the quarantine zone and sealing the security forces out. They had made it to the restricted area, but at the cost of alerting the entire station to their location. The quarantine barrier might keep pursuers at bay temporarily, but it also trapped them in a radiation-contaminated sector with no easy way out. Rex turned to Zaya, anger evident in his face. "That was reckless. You've cornered us." "I've bought us time," she countered, "and put a containment barrier between us and them." "Time to what? Die of radiation poisoning?" She pointed to a small doorway marked with medical insignia. "Emergency decompression chamber. Independent life support. Radiation shielding." Rex stared at her, caught between frustration and reluctant admiration. Her impulsive action had been dangerous, potentially catastrophic, but it had also achieved their objective. While his careful planning minimized risks, her willingness to take calculated gambles created opportunities. Perhaps they were both right, and perhaps together they balanced each other's weaknesses. "Next time," he said, moving toward the chamber, "we plan the reckless move together." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Where's the fun in that?" They found the infirmary 2 decks below, a small but well-equipped space that had escaped the worst of the ship's deterioration. Most of the medical supplies had been looted long ago, but a few sealed emergency kits remained, hidden in a compartment beneath a damaged floor panel that Rex's experienced eye had noticed. The emergency lighting had failed in this section, forcing Rex to activate his wrist-mounted illuminator. The beam cut through the darkness, casting long, distorted shadows across the cramped space. The decompression chamber was barely 4 meters square, designed for treating one patient at a time. With both of them inside and the door sealed against radiation, the room felt suffocatingly small. The adrenaline of combat was fading, and with it came the full awareness of their injuries. Rex's plasma burn throbbed with increasing intensity, the damaged nerve endings sending waves of pain up his arm. Zaya's breathing was labored, one hand pressed against her side where a glancing blow had caught her. Condensation dripped from overhead pipes, the steady plink, plink, plink marking time in their confined sanctuary. The recycled air tasted stale, tinged with the metallic scent of blood and burned fabric. The walls seemed to press inward, forcing them into an unavoidable proximity. The diagnostic panel beeped softly, a constant reminder of their dwindling time. 4 hours and 37 minutes of breathable air remained. Rex broke the seal on a medical kit and extracted a tube of regenerative gel. He attempted to apply it to his wound, but the awkward angle made it impossible to reach the burn that wrapped around his upper arm. His fingers fumbled, smearing the gel uselessly across his sleeve. "Damn it," he muttered, a hiss of pain escaping through clenched teeth. Zaya watched him struggle, her eyes reflecting the harsh light of his wrist illuminator. Without a word, she held out her hand for the gel. Rex hesitated, his muscles tensing. "The air runs out in 4 hours," she said simply. "You'll spend one of them trying to reach that burn." Still, he didn't move, years of survival instinct warring with immediate necessity. "Does trusting me for 5 minutes frighten you more than Kaylin?" she asked, her voice low. Rex exhaled slowly, then handed her the gel and turned, exposing his injured arm. The chamber was so small that her knees pressed against his back as she worked. He could feel her breath, cool against his fevered skin. Her touch was precise, clinical. No wasted movement as she applied the gel in a thin, even layer across the burned tissue. The relief was immediate, cooling fire replaced by blessed numbness. "Military training?" he asked, noting the methodical efficiency of her technique. "Required skill," she replied, her voice closer to his ear than he'd expected in the confined space. "A warrior who cannot heal is only half trained." Her fingers traced the edge of another scar, jagged, white against his skin, before withdrawing. "Done," she said. He turned back, finding her face inches from his in the cramped chamber. For a moment, neither spoke, the only sound their breathing and the soft beep of the diagnostic panel. Rex's gaze dropped to her side, where she still held herself carefully, protecting injured ribs. "Your turn," he said. A brief hesitation, then a nod. Practicality overruling pride. She shifted, lifting the edge of her torn garment just enough to reveal a deep bruise spreading across her rib cage. The blue of her skin had darkened to nearly black where the impact had landed. "Cracked," he said, not a question but an assessment, as his fingers carefully probed the area. Her skin was cooler than a human's, smooth beneath his touch. She didn't flinch, though he knew it must hurt. Deep tissue damage. He applied the gel with the same efficiency she had shown, his calloused fingers incongruously gentle. As he worked, they shifted positions in the tiny space, an awkward dance of knees and elbows in close quarters. His hand passed over a different mark, deliberate, precise, raised tissue forming a pattern that could only be a brand. He paused but didn't ask, continuing his work in silence. Only when he had finished and she had lowered her garment did he meet her eyes. He nodded toward where the brand was hidden once more. "Kaylin?" he asked quietly. She didn't answer immediately, her violet eyes studying his face as if searching for something. "Yes," she finally said. The air between them hung heavy with unspoken questions. Outside, the abandoned ship creaked and groaned around them, the sounds of settling metal emphasizing their isolation. "Why?" he asked, the single word encompassing volumes. "I refuse to be his trophy," she said, each word measured, precise. He thought pain would teach obedience. "Did it?" The ghost of a smile touched her lips. "What do you think?" Rex found himself looking at her differently, not as a target or a problem, but as a survivor. Someone who had endured and emerged unbroken. "Did he do this because you were weak?" he asked, the question slipping out before he could consider its implications. "No," she said, holding his gaze. "He did it because he feared I would become strong." The words hung between them, resonating with a truth that transcended their different worlds. In that moment, Rex saw her, really saw her, not as an alien warrior or a bounty, but as a reflection of his own struggle against those who would control or diminish him. The diagnostic panel beeped again, drawing their attention. 3 hours and 12 minutes of air remaining. "We need a plan," Rex said, grateful for the change of subject. "We can't stay here indefinitely." Zaya nodded, her tactical mind already working the problem. "Kaylin's hunters will have the main transit hubs locked down. The commercial docks will be watched." "What about the refueling station on the dark side?" Rex suggested. "It's technically outside station jurisdiction, a neutral zone. Ships stop there to top off before making long jumps." "It's possible," Zia agreed, considering. "But how do we get there? Every internal route will be monitored." Rex was silent for a moment, then looked up, a reckless idea forming. "We don't take an internal route. We go outside." She followed his gaze to the ceiling, understanding immediately. "An EVA? Across the station's outer hull? It's the last thing they'll expect. Their tracking systems are calibrated for internal movement, not external." It was a desperate plan, but desperation was all they had left. When their meager air supply dwindled to the critical point, they prepared for the most dangerous part of their escape. Using parts scavenged from the quarantine zone, Rex had cobbled together 2 makeshift EVA suits. Not proper spacesuits, but emergency pressure garments that would keep them alive for the 30 minutes they needed to traverse the station's outer hull. These won't protect against prolonged exposure, he warned, checking the seals on Zea's suit. His movements were still slower than usual, the antitoxin continuing its work through his system. And the magnetic boots are jury-rigged at best. One wrong step, and you're drifting into the void. Zea nodded, her face grim with determination. I understand the risks. They accessed an emergency airlock designed for external repairs, a small chamber barely large enough for both of them. As the air cycled out, the temperature plummeted, their breath forming crystalline clouds that quickly dissipated in the thinning atmosphere. Then the outer door opened, and they were facing the void. The sight was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. Silos hung suspended against the backdrop of infinite black, its curved surface stretching away into darkness. Stars glittered with cold indifference, eternal and distant. Below them, or above or beside direction, losing all meaning in the absence of gravity, the market moon continued its business, oblivious to the 2 figures now clinging to its skin. Their magnetic boots activated with a dull clunk, anchoring them to the hull. Communication was limited to short-range radio, the crackling of static a constant companion as they began their perilous journey. Stay close, Rex's voice came through Zea's helmet, distorted but clear enough. Follow exactly in my footsteps. The hull plating isn't uniform. Some sections won't hold the magnetic lock. They moved with agonizing slowness, each step a deliberate calculation. Rex led the way, his hunter's instincts and technical knowledge guiding them along maintenance routes and external support structures. Zea followed, her natural agility making her more adept at the zero-gravity movement than he had expected. The journey was surreal, a silent ballet played out against the canvas of stars. They communicated sparingly, conserving oxygen and power. When they did speak, it was in terse, practical exchanges, warnings about obstacles, confirmations of status. Halfway to their destination, Rex's vision suddenly blurred, a wave of dizziness from the still circulating toxin. He stumbled, his damaged magnetic boots slipping on the metal surface. There was a horrible moment of weightlessness as he began to drift away from the hull, slowly at first, then with increasing speed. Panic, his own but also something else, something foreign, flooded his consciousness. Zea's voice cut through his helmet comm. Rex! He struggled to reorient himself, but his training hadn't prepared him for true zero-G. The station was receding, growing smaller with each passing second. Then something unexpected happened. The neural nanites still circulating in his bloodstream activated, forming a temporary bridge between their minds. Muscle memory that wasn't his own suddenly flooded his consciousness. Zea's training, countless hours in zero-gravity combat simulators, precise movements to control momentum without handholds. Without conscious thought, Rex found his body responding with techniques he'd never learned. Angling his torso to create drag, using micro-adjustments of his limbs to stabilize his spin. The knowledge wasn't his, but in that moment, it became part of him. Simultaneously, Zea detached the emergency tether from her belt and launched herself toward him, using the hull's surface as a springboard. She moved with absolute precision, the same techniques now flowing through Rex's borrowed awareness. She collided with him in open space, the impact sending them into a slow spin. With practiced efficiency, she secured the tether to his suit, then used the momentum of their spin to slingshot them back toward the hull. They hit harder than intended, the impact jarring them both. But they were alive and still attached to the station. How did you, Rex began, his voice shaken. The nanites, she replied simply. They're designed to share critical information in moments of extreme stress, combat techniques, survival skills. I felt you in my head, he said, the sensation unlike anything he'd experienced. Not intrusive, as he might have expected, but seamless, as if a missing piece had temporarily clicked into place. And I felt you, she acknowledged. The bridge works both ways. The revelation hung between them, another boundary crossed. The nanites had forged a connection more intimate than physical proximity, more honest than words. For a brief moment, they had truly known each other's minds. They continued their journey with renewed caution, but with a deeper understanding of each other's capabilities. The neural link remained dormant most of the time, but occasionally flared when one of them needed the other's specific knowledge. Rex's expertise on station architecture, Zaya's experience with zero-G navigation. The refueling station grew slowly larger in their visors, a promise of temporary safety. Its neutral status meant that Kalen's hunters couldn't openly pursue them there, at least not without violating conventions that even a warlord would hesitate to break. They had almost reached it when the neural link flared again, this time with a warning that wasn't from either of them. A third presence, familiar yet alien, brushed against their shared consciousness. "I see you, little bird," a voice growled through Zaya's comm, the pet name twisted into a threat. "Always trying to fly away." Through the nanite link, Rex felt Zaya's visceral fear response. Not conscious terror, but something deeper, instinctive. The psychological scars left by years under Kalen's control. Kalen had found them. The neutral refueling station was a stark contrast to the chaotic markets of Xylos proper. Its architecture was purely functional, all clean lines and exposed infrastructure. It clung to the dark side of the moon like a metallic parasite, drawing its power from the massive fusion reactors that propelled Xylos through space. By convention and practical necessity, the station was a demilitarized zone, a place where, by unspoken law, all conflicts were to be set aside. Commerce required certain safe spaces where transactions could occur without fear of violence or reprisal. Kalen ignored the custom. He stood before them in the station's main concourse, flanked by his elite guard, his scarred face a mask of possessive rage. He was an imposing figure, tall even for his species, with skin the color of burnished copper and eyes like molten gold. His armor, unlike the utilitarian gear of his hunters, was ornate, covered in symbols of rank and achievement. The other patrons of the station melted away, sensing the impending confrontation and wanting no part in it. Within moments, the concourse was empty, save for Rex, Zaya, Kalen, and his guards. Kalen didn't address Zaya. He spoke only to Rex, as if she were not present, or as if her presence were irrelevant to the transaction at hand. "The bounty is doubled," Kalen said, his voice a low growl that seemed to reverberate in the chamber. "For her return, unharmed." His eyes, cold and calculating, assessed Rex like merchandise. "Her contract is yours to sell. Name your price." Rex felt Zaya stiffen beside him, her body coiled with tension and readiness. He looked at her, really looked, seeing beyond the warrior facade to the woman beneath. She stood tall and silent, her expression unreadable, her pride not allowing her to plead or show fear. But her eyes told a different story. There was a fleeting hope there, quickly masked by a lifetime of expecting the worst. She believed he would take the deal. It was the smart play, the logical conclusion to their bizarre entanglement. He would be rich, free, and rid of the most dangerous complication in his life. It was what any sensible bounty hunter would do. Rex returned his gaze to Kalen, considering the warlord with new eyes. He saw the cruelty etched into the lines of his face, the casual ownership in his stance as he spoke of Zaya. He thought of the scars on her body, the brand she carried, the desperate gamble she had taken to escape this man's control. He thought of his own solitary life, the empty credits, the ghosts of his past. He thought of the fire and defiance in the woman standing beside him, the way she had fought at his side, the stories they had shared in the humming darkness beneath the reactor. He had spent his life running from connections, from responsibility. Now one was staring him in the face, demanding a response. Rex gave a slow, weary smile. "Sorry," he said, his hand moving to his blaster with deliberate calm. "I'm a bounty hunter, but I have my principles." He drew his weapon, not aiming at Zaya, but at Kalen. "I never return the merchandise." The statement hung in the air for a heartbeat, a declaration of intent that changed everything. Zaya's surprise was palpable, a momentary break in her composure that quickly resolved into grim determination. Kalen's face contorted with rage, the facade of civilized negotiation crumbling to reveal the warlord beneath. "Then you die together," he snarled, signaling his guards to attack. The battle was short and decisive. Kalen's rage made him predictable, his attacks fueled by wounded pride rather than tactical consideration. Rex and Zaya moved as one, a seamless fusion of tactics and ferocity honed by their days of forced alliance. Rex's shots were precise, disabling rather than killing, creating openings that Zaya exploited with lethal efficiency. They fought back to back, covering each other's vulnerabilities, anticipating each other's movements with an almost preternatural awareness. When it was over, Kalen and his guard lay broken and humiliated in the heart of the neutral zone, a message to all who might come after them. They weren't dead. Killing them would have triggered a blood feud that would follow them across the galaxy, but they were defeated, their reputation shattered. "This isn't over," Kalen spat, blood staining his ornate armor. "The contract is fulfilled," Rex interrupted, his voice level. "By the laws of the hunt, by the traditions of your people, she is bound to me now, and I choose to honor that bond by respecting her freedom." He looked at Zaya, a question in his eyes. She nodded, a slight movement that carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken words. "We're leaving," Rex continued, addressing Kalen, but keeping his eyes on Zaya. "If you pursue us, if you send others after us, we won't be as merciful next time." They backed away slowly, weapons still ready, until they reached the docking bay, where a small transport was preparing for departure. Credits exchanged hands, no questions asked, and within the hour they were breaking orbit, leaving Xylos and its tangled web of bounties and contracts behind. In the quiet of deep space, with stars streaming past the viewport, Rex finally asked the question that had been hanging between them since their confrontation with Kalen. "What now?" Zaya considered him thoughtfully, her violet eyes unreadable. "The galaxy is vast," she said finally, "and filled with opportunities for those with our particular set of skills." "A partnership?" Rex raised an eyebrow, surprised by the suggestion. "A trial period," she amended, a hint of a smile playing at the corners of her mouth, "to see if you can keep up." Months later, on a distant moon at the edge of the outer rim, a new bounty hunting team was making a name for itself. A human tactician with a quick draw and a blue-skinned warrior with a silver blade. They were the best. They never missed. Their ship, the Unbound, had become a symbol both feared and respected in the shadowy world of bounty hunting. Those who hired them knew they operated by a strict code. No innocents, no children, no slaves. Their word, once given, was unbreakable. As they sat in the cockpit after their latest successful mission, watching the stars through the viewport, Rex looked at Zaya and realized he had finally collected the only bounty that ever truly mattered. A partner he could trust, a purpose beyond mere survival, and perhaps, though neither of them would admit it yet, something that felt suspiciously like belonging.